What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here to examine Uncanny X-Men Annual 4, brought to you by all of these fine people. Something to note here with the credits, art by John Romita Jr. and Bob McLeod. Bob McLeod would later go on to co-create the New Mutants with Chris Claremont in the early issues of that series, and Romita Jr. is a very well-known artist. I feel like the art here doesn't exactly look like what Romita Jr.'s style would later look like. This is still pretty early in his career, I feel, and maybe sometimes an artist, especially early on in their career, they might be trying to ape the style of someone else. I feel like every now and then in this issue I could see glimpses of, hey, that kind of looks like something John Byrne would have done, and so I'm wondering if Romita Jr. was kind of trying to mimic the style of John Byrne, who had been with this series for a little while, before finding his own style later on, because even when you get to Romita Jr. Drawing this series, Uncanny X-Men, a few years later, his style looks much closer to what I think of when I think of Romita Jr. now. But anyway, I do not really enjoy reading annuals. Most of the time I find myself asking, why couldn't this have just been a regular issue in the numbered series? I don't know why we have an extra issue, and then I'm over here trying to figure out, okay, it takes place after this, does it take place before this issue or after this issue? I don't know. Most of the time, I just don't like it, and chief among my complaints with reading annuals is, at least with this issue, we have about 5 pages of plot that is stretched out into about a 40-page issue. Most of the time, because annuals have to be longer than a regular-sized issue, it feels to me like they are often just trying to stretch it out with a whole lot of fluff that doesn't really need to be there. In this issue, it is Nightcrawler's birthday, the X-Men are celebrating, and he gets a glass figurine of himself that explodes and seemingly kills him. Professor Xavier summons Doctor Strange. I have no idea how Professor X knows Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is examining Nightcrawler. He does mention that Nightcrawler is fully human. He is not part demon. That is something that I haven't read Chuck Austen, the storyline from his Uncanny X-Men run, The Draco. I haven't read that in a while. I have read it. It's just been several years since I read it, but the last time I read it, I seem to recall that storyline said Azazel was not a demon, but just a really long-lived mutant, kind of like Apocalypse. So it could be that if I went back and looked at the Draco, which I have no interest in doing, but if I did, that it could be that would actually line up with this issue. But a lot of people seem to have remembered that storyline saying that Nightcrawler is the son of the actual demon Azazel, and I don't think that's what was revealed in that storyline from the early 2000s. But anyway, most of this issue is us following the rest of the X-Men, minus Kitty Pryde, going into hell with Doctor Strange to try and rescue Nightcrawler's soul. We see something called Marguerite of the Winding Way has attacked Nightcrawler, and then the other X-Men, being his teammates, they want to try and save him. And so much of this issue is just a gigantic waste of time. The X-Men fight this thing, and then they fight this thing, and then this thing, and then this thing, and I just want to get to the point. It didn't really feel like there was a whole lot of point to like 80% of this comic. We're just fighting a whole bunch of unrelated monsters in what appears to be hell, and like right off the bat, Doctor Strange says this doesn't really look like hell. Apparently, at this point, he had recently gone into hell to fight for the life of Clea, and so he says this doesn't really look like the place that I was at. And then finally we find out that this is actually all just a big illusion, and this is where I'm a little confused, because we find out Marguerite is upset that Nightcrawler killed her son. Marguerite is Nightcrawler's stepmom, or foster mom. She raised him, and Nightcrawler killed her son. She is upset about that, and then we find out Nightcrawler actually was following orders. Her son Stefan said, I fear the darkness in me, and someday I may kill someone, and if I do, Nightcrawler, I want you to kill me. And so Nightcrawler killed her son, and now she's like, oh, okay, all is forgiven. and somehow Margulies' daughter, Jemaine, is somehow involved in all this, and I don't really understand, even after reading the issue, I don't really see how she fits into this. Somehow, she wanted to manipulate the X-Men into approaching Margulie so that the X-Men or Nightcrawler could show Margulie that Nightcrawler is innocent. I still don't really understand what part she played here, but Margulie forgives Nightcrawler for what he did to Stefan, and then we find out Jemaine is actually Amanda Sefton, and I actually had to go back and look. I had forgotten that Amanda Sefton had shown up in this series by this point. She was kidnapped by Arcade in that little two-parter a little while back. If Amanda Sefton had supernatural abilities, you would think that she would have done something to defend herself against this guy with a murderous theme park, but whatever. I feel like this reveal that Jemaine is actually Amanda Sefton probably would have worked better if we had seen more of Amanda Sefton up until this point, but since I had forgotten that she had even showed up in the series before now, this reveal doesn't really carry a lot of weight, in my opinion. And then Wolverine tells Kitty, hey, you're an X-Man, why don't you celebrate with us? Because at the very beginning of the issue, it says that Kitty doesn't really feel like an X-Man yet. And then she's thinking to herself, oh, Peter is just wonderful, which, you know, ties in with what I mentioned last week about Kitty Pryde having a crush on Colossus and that relationship being super weird. And then that's about it. Doctor Strange does mention at one point that he needs to investigate Margulie because she's very powerful. She was able to summon the Eye of Agamotto to her, and he's going to investigate that. I don't know if he ever does. Honestly, I don't know what Margulie's deal is, why she looks like she has goat horns here. She kind of sort of looks like Mystique. I'm wondering if at this point, if Mystique was meant to be related to Margulie. Later on, they don't really go in that direction, but her face here, I feel like looks kind of like Mystique's, but later appearances, I feel like she actually has more of a human face, like she looks human. I seem to recall a flashback in an issue of Excalibur in the 90s where she looked human. But I don't think we see Margulie a whole lot in Uncanny X-Men, and as far as I know, she doesn't show up in the Doctor Strange series, but yeah, not a whole lot going on in this issue. If you were writing X-Men and then you have an annual coming up and they say it has to be 50 pages long, including ads or whatever, I feel like you could have just done like a 10-page Nightcrawler story where we find out that Nightcrawler killed his foster brother, and then do a whole bunch of other stories to fill out the space. Do a short little story showing an adventure that Wolverine was on when he was with Department H, or do a story of Kitty Pryde trying to, you know, a dog sneaks into the mansion and steals her homework or something, and she's chasing it. I don't know, something stupid like that. Just do a bunch of short little stories like that instead of taking this story that really has about 5 pages of plot and then stretching it out to the whole thing. I just felt like this whole issue was a big waste of time. And Amanda Sefton does show up every now and then, and I feel like in later appearances they call her Amanda Sefton. They don't call her Jemaine, which my understanding is that's her real name, but later on I think they just call her Amanda. She is a somewhat important recurring character later on. Margulie, not so much. So this issue is important because it introduces one of Nightcrawler's supporting characters, but I feel like you could have just done this in a main issue of the X-Men series. Not one of my favorite issues, but I guess about on par for an annual. That's about all that I have to say about this issue, so I will be back in the future with more videos. In the meantime, have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.